Hi, everybody. This is Jimmy DeYoung. Welcome to Prophecy Today video. Prophecy Today has a mission, and that mission is to look at current events in light of biblical prophecy. We talked with many of our broadcast partners across the world to find out what is happening in the geopolitical activities of this world. For example, we went to Washington, D.C. on the broadcast this weekend, and we talked with Colonel Bob McGinnis. He talked about the 10th anniversary of the war going on in Afghanistan and its significance to the entire world's situation. We also looked at Tayyip Erdogan, who's the Prime Minister of Turkey. He's accusing Israel of being a nuclear power and a threat to the entire Middle East. Now, Tayyip Erdogan doesn't know for sure that, indeed, Israel has nuclear weapons. Bob brought that to our attention and talked about how Tayyip Erdogan has a desire to be the pan-Islamic leader of the Middle East. David Dolan gave us our Middle East news update, and we had to talk about President Bashar Assad of Syria and his threat to go into the Golan Heights, place his missile launchers there, and attack Tel Aviv if indeed there is a NATO strike on Syria. Of course, you know the situation in Syria is not good. Stability is not there. And so the NATO operation is looking at attacking or going into to deal with Syria. And Bashar Assad says he'll attack Tel Aviv if they do that. The Israeli Defense Force Chief of Staff reminding all people around the world the 73 Yom Kippur war. He said Israel has to be war ready every single moment of every day. And Dr. Rob Congdon, we looked at the NATO operation with a possibility of dealing with Syria. What NATO is all about, it's basically the army for the European Union, howbeit the United States has much control of what NATO does. But there is now this replacement for a European Union army with NATO, and it's very significant. And, of course, whenever you talk with Dr. Rob Congdon about the European Union, you must mention the financial crisis. The governor of the Bank of England said it's the worst crisis financially in the world's history. Well, this is all setting the stage. Every single conversation we have with our broadcast partners, setting the stage for Bible prophecy to be fulfilled. May I suggest you re-listen to some of these conversations or call a friend, tell them to listen to what these men had to say, what they brought to the table, our broadcast partners. And you can do that at our website, prophecytoday.com, PTRN, Prophecy Today Radio Network. But we also had conversations with Steve Herzig and Dr. John Whitcomb. With Steve, we discussed Yom Kippur, the holiest of all the Jewish holy days. And with Dr. John, we talked about the sacrificial system being restored in the kingdom period. After Jesus Christ builds his temple in Jerusalem, they will reinstitute the sacrificial system. You know, Yom Kippur is the holiest, as I said, the most solemn of all the Jewish fast days or feast days. Yom Kippur, the day of covering, the day of atonement, covering for sin. And by the way, that had to be blood that covered that sin for a year period of time. High priest going into the Holy of Holies once every year and taking the blood of the animal, sacrificed animal, pour it on the mercy seat between the cherubim there on the Ark of the Covenant. It would cover the sins of the Jewish people, not take them away, simply cover them for a 1 year period of time. If you want to do more study on that, you can go to the book of Leviticus, chapter 23, where it lists all 7 feasts, but go to chapter 16 in particular, where it deals with the feast of Yom Kippur. Very important. In Leviticus 16, God's plan for this fast day is laid out. In verse 6, he talks about the high priest, who first of all does sacrificial activities for himself, cleanses up his life and the house of his family. And then in verse 30, it talks about how it will clean all sins away, actually cover all sins for that 1 year period of time. And verse 34 says it's done once a year, as we have been mentioning. More study will help you to better understand Yom Kippur, Leviticus chapter 16. The high priest does this alone. He must do it by himself. Once a year, he goes into the Holy of Holies behind the veil of the temple. This is for national salvation by the high priest, at least to cover the sin until the ultimate sacrifice, Jesus Christ, would come by. By the way, Jesus Christ is our high priest today after the order of Melchizedek. That's found in the book of Hebrews, chapter 7 and verse 17. Jesus has done the sacrifice in the heavenly temple. He's taken his blood into the heavenly temple. That's the book of Hebrews, chapter 9. And look at, if you will, the verses there that deal with that situation, verses 23 and 24, where it talks about, in fact, how he goes into the heavenlies, and what's in the heavenlies is the original. What's on the earth is simply the replica. By the way, Jesus Christ will enter the temple on the Temple Mount in Jerusalem, the one that he will build at his second coming. Now, that's verse 28 of Hebrews chapter 9. It says this, "So Christ was once offered to bear the sins of many, and unto them that look for him shall he appear the second time without sin unto salvation." Christ has fulfilled the first 4 of the Jewish feast. He was crucified on Passover, buried on unleavened bread, resurrected on first fruits, and then, as he had promised, the Holy Spirit came on the Feast of Tabernacles. And he will fulfill the last 3 feasts. We talked earlier about the fact that indeed when he comes back, it'll be the Feast of Trumpets. Matthew 24:31, he says to the angel, "Take the trumpet and blow the trumpet and call a solemn assembly." Now, that's not the rapture of the church. That's the second coming of Jesus Christ. He'll walk into the temple on Yom Kippur and go there into the Holy of Holies. And again, that's what it says. Study through the book of Hebrews, chapter 9, verses 24 to 28. "For Christ," verse 24, "is not entered into the holy place made with hands, which are the figures of the true, but into heaven itself, now to appear in the presence of God for us." He's done that. But listen to verse 26. "For then must he have offered many times since the foundation of the world, but now once in the end of the world, he hath appeared to put away sin by the sacrifice of himself." Jesus Christ comes back to the earth. He comes back on Rosh Hashanah, Feast of Trumpets. He will build his temple. He will go to the Jezreel Valley. The Battle of Armageddon takes place. He goes then to Petra, gathers in those Jewish believers who have been protected for 3.5 years. He comes into Jerusalem, comes across the Kedron Valley, up through the eastern gate, walks into the Holy of Holies, and that day is Yom Kippur. He will fulfill that Jewish feast. As he did the first 4, he will fulfill the last 4. But remember, before all of this begins to be fulfilled, the rapture of the church. And the rapture can happen at any moment. And having said that, nothing left for me to say, except let's keep looking up until